What happens when you cut a veteran worker's vacation time in half? I once worked at a large family-owned company that was known for having fantastic benefits. If you stuck around for 25 years, you earned 8 full weeks of vacation plus 2 additional weeks of personal time. It was one of those rare places where long service really meant something. The company ran 3 shifts with over 250 employees, and everyone knew the older guys who had been there for decades. Among them was Jimmy. He had started at the company when he was just 20 years old, and now at 63, he was a grizzled veteran who did not care much about management's nonsense anymore. Jimmy was also one of only 2 people in the entire company who knew how to make a specialized electronic part that was critical to our product. This was not something you could just learn overnight. It was proprietary, precise, and absolutely essential. One day, the owner of the company announced that he was selling to a large corporation. He promised things would stay mostly the same and wished us all well. Of course, that turned out to be a lie. The new corporate owners swooped in and immediately began stripping away the benefits that had kept people loyal for decades. The first thing they did was slash the maximum vacation from 8 weeks down to 4, and they eliminated personal time altogether. Anyone who already had accumulated more than 4 weeks had until the end of the year to use it, or else lose it forever. There would be no payout for unused days. To make matters worse, they started cleaning house in the office. Anyone close to retirement age was suddenly fired, including Jimmy's only backup. That meant Jimmy was now the only person alive who could make that critical part. Management should have realized how dangerous that was for them, but they did not. Instead, they added insult to injury by announcing a new policy. Vacation no longer had to be approved. Anyone could simply call in and take it. They thought this would be convenient, but for Jimmy, it was the perfect opportunity. Jimmy was furious. Decades of loyalty, countless hours of work, and this was how they treated him? They even hired a new kid and told Jimmy to train him, clearly planning to replace him as soon as possible. So Jimmy made a decision. On the first training day, he called in and announced he was taking all of his vacation and personal time at once. That added up to 10 full weeks. He left, and for 10 weeks the company waited, hoping he would return to resume production. In the meantime, the new hire could not do the job. The specialized part was too complex, and without Jimmy's knowledge, production slowed to a crawl. Still, management assumed he would return once his time was up. But Jimmy had other plans. During those 10 weeks, he quietly applied for new jobs, found a better one, and moved on. When the day came that he was supposed to return, he simply did not show. For 2 days, the company called him and even went to his house, but he was nowhere to be found. On the 3rd day, Jimmy finally called to resign. Management panicked. They had lost the only person who could produce this crucial component. And remember, the only other person who had known the process had already been fired. They scrambled to figure out what to do and eventually had to contact the original founder of the company. That founder was not happy to hear how the new owners had treated his people. He knew exactly how valuable his knowledge was, and he made sure to charge them dearly for it. Reports spread that he demanded a 7-figure contract to train new hires on the production process. The corporation had no choice. They either had to pay him or shut the operation down. In the end, they paid. As for Jimmy, he walked away without a second thought. He had no interest in sticking around for the mess they had created. He found a better job with better conditions and left the corporation to drown in its own greed. The rest of us learned an important lesson watching it all unfold. You do not mess with people's vacation time, especially not when those people are the only ones keeping your business afloat. Years later, Jimmy is still around. I see him sometimes at the local bar, laughing and shaking his head at the memory. The corporation went through restructuring, and things eventually improved after employees started threatening to unionize. Jimmy even returned for a while on his own terms, demanding the reinstatement of benefits and the removal of a couple of toxic managers before he agreed. Those conditions were met, and when those managers were walked out, Jimmy got the last laugh. The whole saga became legendary in our workplace. It proved that even the toughest corporate arrogance can collapse when one underestimated veteran decides to play by the rules to the letter. So, was Jimmy a hero for standing up to the company, or just a man who had finally had enough?
Was I wrong to tear down a roadside memorial on my property? For years, there had been a roadside memorial at the corner of my property. It dated back to 2002, when someone lost their life after driving drunk and crashing into a tree there. First, I did not mind it. Memorials are part of grief. And if someone needed that space to remember their loved one, I could understand. But as time went on, no one seemed to come back to care for it. The cross began to rot and lean dangerously to the side. The flowers had long turned to dust, and the small sign was weather-beaten until the writing was completely unreadable. For at least 5 years no one had visited. It became a forgotten patch of decay more than a place of remembrance. Meanwhile, I was making plans for my property. I had been thinking about installing a privacy fence around my yard. The problem was the fence line went directly through the overgrown patch where the memorial sat. When I considered my options, I could not justify preserving something that no longer served its original purpose. It was entirely on my property, and in my eyes it had turned into an eyesore. So last year I cleared it out. I removed the rotting cross, the faded sign, and the debris around it. Then I built my fence. Honestly, I did not think much about it afterward. It felt like the natural choice. If no one cared enough to visit or maintain it for half a decade, then why should I leave a piece of decaying wood and trash on my land? Everything seemed fine until last week. There was a sudden knock on my door, and when I opened it, I was met by a furious stranger. They accused me of destroying their property and said I had no right to touch the memorial. They even claimed they were going to sue me. I was caught off guard. It had been so long since anyone had visited that I honestly thought the memory had faded from everyone else's life as well. I explained that it was on my property, that I had not seen anyone care for it in years, and that I needed to build my fence. They were not interested in my reasoning. To them, I was the villain who had heartlessly torn down a sacred reminder of a loved one. Since that encounter, I have been turning the situation over in my mind. Did I overstep? Should I have left the memorial, no matter how abandoned it had become? A part of me feels guilty because grief is unpredictable and long-lasting, and maybe for this family, just knowing the memorial existed brought comfort, even if they never came to see it. On the other hand, it was still sitting on my property, literally rotting away, and I had every right to manage my land as I saw fit. The more I think about it, the more complicated it feels. When someone dies, especially in a sudden and tragic way, families often cling to any symbol that keeps that person's memory alive. I understand that. But at the same time, symbols require care. If no one tends to them, they stop being places of love and instead become reminders of neglect. When I looked at that spot before tearing it down, I did not see a sacred place. I saw a crumbling cross and a corner overrun with weeds. It was hard to feel any reverence for something that seemed abandoned. I also wonder about the principle of property rights. If I were to accept the idea that anything placed on my land could remain there indefinitely, even if no one maintained it, I would lose control over my own space. Imagine if someone planted a statue or a bench in your yard without asking, and you were expected to keep it there forever. That seems unreasonable. The memorial may have had meaning at one point, but without continued care or communication, it became just another piece of my property to manage. Still, I cannot ignore the anger in that stranger's face. To them, I did something unforgivable. They may not have visited in years, but perhaps knowing the memorial was there gave them comfort, like a quiet assurance that their loved one had not been forgotten. When I tore it down, I may have ripped away that comfort without realizing it. That part of the situation still weighs on me. In the end, I come back to this. I needed to build my fence. The memorial was on my land, neglected and falling apart. I did what I felt was right for my home. I did not act out of cruelty. I acted out of practicality and a desire to care for my own property. If the family had wanted to preserve the memorial, I believe they should have reached out to me, explained its importance, and maintained it regularly. That never happened. So here I am, wondering whether I am truly in the wrong. Part of me wants to believe that people will understand my perspective. Another part fears that all they will see is someone who destroyed a grieving family's symbol. All I know is that I made a decision, one that seemed logical at the time, but that now leaves me second-guessing myself. So, am I the asshole for tearing down a long-neglected roadside memorial on my own property?
Would you forgive a mother who abandoned you for 10 years? I am a 20-year-old man, and my childhood was shaped almost entirely by my father. My parents were young when they dated, and when my mother became pregnant, they broke up before I was even born. She called my dad to the hospital, handed me over, and told him she was not interested in parenting. She said if he wanted to raise me, he could do it alone. And that is exactly what he did. For the first 10 years of my life, my father was my entire world. My mother provided no child support, offered no visits, and made no effort. My dad pursued support through legal means but got nothing. Still, he never wavered in caring for me. Growing up, I would sometimes ask about my mother. My dad always tried to keep things neutral, even slightly positive, because he did not want me to grow up hating half of where I came from. I realize now how important that was. I was emotionally fragile, and if I had truly known how little she cared, I might have spiraled into insecurity or self-loathing. My dad tried to protect me from that, and I will always appreciate him for it. When I turned 10, my mother suddenly reappeared. She showed up acting like she could just step in and be supermom. She told my dad she wanted me to live with her now and insisted she did not want to fight. When she told me I was moving in with her, I pushed back. I said I wanted to stay with my dad because she was a stranger to me. When she realized she was not getting her way, she lashed out. She spitefully told us that my dad was not even my real father and that I was someone else's biological child. She said it like a weapon, expecting my dad to drop me on the spot. That moment shattered me. I felt guilty and terrified. My dad had raised me on his own, and I could not bear the thought that he was not really my father. I worried constantly that my mother would track down the supposed real dad and take me away. My father reassured me over and over again that he would always be my dad, no matter what, and that he loved me unconditionally. He even paid for a private DNA test just to comfort me. The results showed without a doubt that I was his biological son. He told me he always believed it deep down, even if her cruelty made him sick with doubt. After the results came in, my mother disappeared again, furious that her plan had failed. She clearly expected me to run into her arms, but I felt nothing for her. The way she spoke to me revealed she never would have been a good mother. For nearly another decade, she stayed gone. Then, just a couple of months ago, she came back once again. This time she had a new husband and his 2 young children with her. They came to our house to introduce themselves. She said the children's mother had passed away, and now she would be their mom. She declared that I should see them as siblings and that we should be one big family. I could hardly believe her audacity. I told her to her face that I wanted nothing to do with her or with them. I said that after everything she did, she had no right to expect any relationship with me. She argued that her mistakes were 10 years ago and that she had changed. I told her she could go die in a hole because she was a spiteful woman and unworthy of being called a mother. My dad backed me up and told them to leave. Her husband muttered that we had bad attitudes, but he was ready to go. She, however, tried to linger, as if she still had a right to be there. Since then, she has approached me several times, asking me to hear her out and give her a chance. One time her husband was with her and he accused me of being cruel for telling her to die in a hole. He said I was heartless because I wanted his kids to lose 2 mothers before they even turned 5. His words stung, but I ignored him. The truth is, I do not want to hear her side. I do not want to build a relationship with her. I do not want to risk letting her back into my life only for her to hurt me again. She made her choices when she was 30 years old enough to know exactly what she was doing. She abandoned me when I was a baby, tried to rip me away from the only parent who loved me, and then vanished when the truth was not in her favor. Now she wants to play happy family as if none of it happened. I am the same age now that my parents were when I was born. Even at this age, I know I would never treat a child the way she treated me. The thought of abandoning a baby or spitefully attacking their sense of belonging disgusts me. That is why I cannot forgive her. So, am I wrong for refusing to ever have anything to do with my mother again? Was I wrong to tell a family they neglected their lizard? I work at an exotic pet shop, and part of what we do is boarding services for animals when their owners go away. That means people can leave their reptiles, birds, or other pets with us while they travel, and we'll care for them. I'm 23 years old, and I've worked here long enough to see the full range of pet owners. From those who spoil their animals like children to those who honestly should never have gotten a pet in the first place. One family stood out to me because when they first bought a bearded dragon from us about 1.5 years ago, they seemed responsible. They had done their research, asked all the right questions, and seemed eager to provide a good home. When they first boarded her with us, she was a healthy subadult. She had good weight, bright eyes, and an alert personality. I felt good about her situation. Then, months later, they brought her back again for boarding. This time, I was shocked. She was thin, far thinner than she should have been. I pointed it out gently, but they brushed it off, saying she looked the same and that she was eating normally. I didn't want to push too hard, but in my mind, something was wrong. Fast forward to a few days ago, and they dropped her off again. I wasn't working the day she arrived, but my boss noticed immediately how bad her condition was. She was extremely emaciated, so he gave her some medicine, set her up in a hospital enclosure, and told me to monitor her closely. When I came in the next morning, I knew something was wrong the second I opened the door. The entire place reeked of death. I checked the enclosure, and sure enough, she had passed away during the night. She was stiff, skin and bones, with her eyes crusted over. When I gently turned her body, I could literally see the outline of her organs through her skin. It was horrifying. I felt upset, not only because I cared about the animals we look after, but also because I had seen her decline and knew this didn't happen overnight. She hadn't been cared for properly for a long time. Out of frustration, I called the number they left in our boarding log. The first few times, it went straight to voicemail. Finally, I left a message. I explained that their lizard had passed away and that I wanted to talk with them about her condition. I said she looked emaciated and hadn't received proper care for months, and I asked them to call me back as soon as possible. Later that day, my boss called me. He told me the family had called him, complaining about my voicemail. They said I was rude and disrespectful, and that I had no right to accuse them of neglect. My boss asked me exactly what I said, so I repeated my message word for word. His response was just, okay. He didn't scold me, but I could tell he was filing it away in his mind. The next morning, the family came in, just the mother and her son, who I think is about 19. The mom immediately told me off, saying I had no right to speak to her the way I did. She insisted I didn't know the full circumstances and that I was wrong to claim neglect. I tried to keep calm, but I also felt the need to speak honestly. I told her that when you get a pet and claim it's part of the family, that animal should not look the way her lizard did. I turned to the son and said I understood life gets busy, but that if they couldn't keep up with her care, they needed to either adjust their routine or put her up for adoption. He swore he was taking care of her and that she was fine just a week ago. I pushed back, saying, "This doesn't happen in a week. You should have taken her to a vet or rehomed her." Her condition was unacceptable. The tension was thick. The mom was visibly upset. The son looked embarrassed, and eventually they just took the dragon's body and left. Now I'm left second-guessing myself. On one hand, I spoke the truth. That poor animal suffered for months because of neglect, and in my heart I feel like someone had to say it. On the other hand, maybe my voicemail came across harsher than I intended. They were grieving too, and instead of comfort, I gave them blunt criticism. But then again, what's worse, hurting their feelings with honesty, or staying silent while they walk away thinking they did nothing wrong? If they ever get another pet, I don't want the same thing to happen again. Animals can't speak for themselves. Sometimes it takes someone like me to advocate for them, even if it makes me the bad guy in someone else's story. So that's where I'm stuck. I feel guilty for possibly making a hard moment even harder for them, but I also feel like I owed it to that lizard to say the truth out loud. Maybe there's no right way to handle a situation like this. So, am I the asshole for telling a family they neglected their lizard after it died in our care? What happens when a greedy landlord tries to sell our business equipment? I worked for a leisure company that ran things like soft play, indoor soccer, and laser tag. We were in negotiations to renew the lease on one of our parks before everything fell apart in 2020. When the lockdown hit, our sites were closed, revenue was halted, and priorities shifted. Even though rent was still being paid, no one thought the landlord would try to push an eviction while every single business in the area was struggling. We were wrong. One day, we received a letter from the landlord demanding that we vacate the property within 7 days. Every piece of equipment had to be removed, and anything left behind after that period would become his property. That detail became very important later. Now, moving out of one of our parks is no small task. The equipment requires construction, installation, and specialized staff to dismantle. With lockdown restrictions and most businesses closed, retrieving everything felt impossible. Losing the site would hurt, but losing all of the assets would be devastating. Still, we had no choice but to begin. A few days into our 7-day notice, we learned something that pushed us from worried to furious. The landlord had been advertising the site to our competitors. He was not just offering them the building. He was offering it fully equipped with everything we had installed. His pitch was that it was ready to go, just needs rebranding. His entire plan was to evict us quickly, keep all of our assets, and then turn around and charge higher rent to one of our rivals. That was when we decided to comply exactly with his instructions. He told us to remove all of our property within 7 days. So that is precisely what we did. Local businesses stepped up and offered free storage. Some of our staff returned from lockdown temporarily to help. Over the next week, we removed, sold, or destroyed every single thing we had installed. Normally, during a move, we might leave some construction in place. Things like disco lights that are too hard to reach, or bar setups that could still be useful to the next tenant. But not this time. We stripped everything. We ripped out the flooring we had laid, tore down wooden partition walls we had built, removed every locker, and dismantled every piece of equipment. We did not even leave the light fittings. By the time we were done, the place looked like a gutted shell. The landlord's entire scheme collapsed. He had been counting on showing the property off to competitors as a fully equipped site, but instead, he was left with bare floors and walls. He now faced a large renovation bill to restore the building to a usable state, and his supposed deals fell apart. To make matters worse for him, lockdown was extended, which meant he was not only left without rent for at least another month, but he also had no potential buyers. For us, the outcome was much brighter. We managed to sell a lot of our salvaged assets: fridges, televisions, tables, food, and of course the specialized equipment. The cash injection helped us pay staff wages and sustain operations through the closures. We had turned his attempt to profit from us into a disaster for him. When the day came to hand in the keys, the handover was almost awkwardly quick. The landlord avoided conversation and made no mention of the missing equipment. He had no legal ground to stand on because we had followed his written instructions exactly. Later, when it came to deposits, he tried to create complications, but our legal team reminded him that the building was actually in better shape than when we had moved in. We had handled much of the maintenance ourselves, and even after our demolition, we cleaned nearly everything. He had no case, and after a little pressure, he paid the deposits back in full. Months later, the building remained vacant. Our company survived despite the pandemic and despite his attempted scheme. The staff kept their jobs, and we even managed to find a bit of satisfaction in knowing that his greed backfired so spectacularly. What started as an eviction notice designed to rob us of our assets turned into a victory for us. We followed the rules exactly as he laid them out, and by doing so, we left him with nothing but an empty shell, unpaid bills, and lost opportunities. So, who do you think came out on top in this landlord's greedy little game? What would you do if you caught your spouse slipping powder into your coffee? I am a 46-year-old man, and I have been with my wife for 7 years, married for 4. For the most part, our marriage has been a good one. She has always been kind, attentive, and thoughtful. One of her small but meaningful rituals was making me coffee every single morning. It felt like love in a cup, a gesture that started my day with comfort and routine. But recently, everything about that morning ritual has taken on a darker tone. For the past few weeks, I began noticing something strange after my morning coffee. I would feel dizzy, nauseous, and sometimes my hands would shake. At first, I blamed it on work stress or maybe something I ate. I tried brushing it off, but the symptoms persisted and worsened. I never once considered that it could be connected to the coffee my wife made, until 2 days ago. That afternoon, I came home early. I walked into the kitchen and froze when I saw my wife holding a small, unmarked vial. She was pouring some kind of powder into my coffee mug. It didn't look like sugar or creamer. When she realized I was there, she quickly slipped the vial into her pocket. Her voice shook as she told me it was just a new coffee mix, but she could not look me in the eye. Later that evening, I calmly asked her what it really was. She said it was a natural supplement meant to help me feel better. But when I asked her why it had no label and why she kept it hidden, she had no real explanation. That terrified me. Suddenly, all those dizzy spells, the nausea, and the trembling hands seemed sinister. Out of fear and confusion, I told her I needed some space and asked her to stay with her mother for a few days. She cried and told me I was breaking her trust, that I was overreacting, but I stood my ground. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the vial on the counter, wondering if I was poisoning myself without knowing it. I locked the doors, checked the locks again, and still felt paranoid in my own home. I love my wife, but for the first time I was genuinely afraid. The next morning I called 911. I explained what had happened and handed the vial to the police when they came by. They said they would have it tested. Meanwhile, I could not ignore how badly I was feeling: weak, lightheaded, and increasingly sick. I finally admitted I needed medical help and went to the hospital. Doctors ran some blood work and said there was something abnormal, but they would need to send the samples to a lab. While I waited for results, they kept me under observation because of the worsening dizziness and nausea. Lying there in the hospital bed, I felt utterly alone. My wife kept calling and texting, begging me to believe her. She said it was just an herbal energy boost she bought online from a friend's recommendation, but she never explained why she hid it from me. I tried to replay the past few weeks in my head. Was she really trying to help me? Was she lying to cover up something dangerous? Or was this a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control? Every time I thought about trusting her again, My mind went back to the image of her slipping that powder into my mug while thinking I was not there to see it. The police officers who collected the vial looked serious, and that terrified me. I have no answers yet. My wife continues to cry and apologize, but her frantic texts only make my head spin more. I love her, but I cannot shake the fear that she might have put me in danger. I do not know if I will ever be able to trust her again, no matter what the lab results show. Now I am lying here, feeling sick and exhausted, wondering if I overreacted. Part of me feels guilty for asking her to leave. Another part of me thinks I may have saved my own life by not drinking another cup of that coffee. My entire marriage feels like it is crumbling in front of me. So, am I overreacting for asking my wife to stay at her mom's after finding her slipping powder into my coffee? How did I outcook my world-class chef girlfriend with just a toes tie? About a month ago, I stumbled into a situation that still baffles me every time I step into the kitchen. I live with my girlfriend, who happens to be what I can only describe as a goddess-level chef. This woman has trained in restaurants where reservations are booked months in advance, where people fly across the world just to taste her food. She even turned down an offer from one of the world's most highly rated restaurants because she felt their garden salad was uninspired and their waitstaff were strange. That's the caliber of skill she has. When we moved in together, it was obvious I was out of my depth in the kitchen. Sure, I can cook a decent meal, but when you are with someone who can take roadkill and make it taste like Wagyu beef, you step aside. She has opinions on different salts, insists on only using her own professional cookware, and plates meals with little details that look like art projects. I love cooking, but I am not foolish enough to compete with her. I happily surrendered the kitchen and left her to craft her masterpieces. Then, one day last month, she was on her period and feeling miserable. She asked me to make her a tomato toast tie, which is basically a grilled cheese sandwich with tomato. It sounded simple enough, and I figured even I could not mess that up. I buttered 2 slices of sourdough on both sides, added a few slices of tomato, layered on some good aged cheddar, set the pan to medium heat, and flipped it once. It was straightforward, the kind of thing anyone could manage. When she took her first bite, she went completely silent. I panicked, thinking I had somehow managed to offend her refined palate with my clumsy sandwich. But then she looked at me with this bewildered expression and said, "I can't make it this good." I laughed because the idea sounded absurd. This woman knows molecular gastronomy, can balance flavors in ways most chefs only dream of, and yet she was telling me my simple toast tie was beyond her. I thought she was joking, but Nosh was dead serious. That was my mistake. From that moment on, I accidentally created a monster. For the past month, she has asked me to make her toasties almost daily. She will come home from a 12-hour shift of preparing exquisite, intricate dishes for paying customers, drop her bag, and instead of telling me about her day, she asks, "Can you make me that toast tie?" The irony is suffocating. My girlfriend can taste a soup and identify every spice and herb used. She can plate a dessert so beautiful it looks like something from a gallery. And yet she insists she cannot replicate the sandwich I made. She has even tried multiple times with the same ingredients, the same bread, the same cheese. But each time she throws her hands up and admits it is not the same. Here is the real kicker. I have no idea what I am doing differently. My so-called technique is nothing more than buttering bread, flipping it once, and pulling it off the pan when it looks golden brown. That is it. There is no secret trick, no special step, nothing. I keep telling her this, but she does not believe me. Somehow, the way I make a toast tie has become the pinnacle of comfort food for her, and I have no explanation. Now I am trapped. On the one hand, it feels wonderful to give her something she loves so much. Her face lights up in genuine excitement when I hand her the plate, and that makes me happy. But on the other hand, I feel like I have unintentionally insulted her entire professional identity. This is a woman who could outcook 99% of the planet with her eyes closed. But in her own home, she swears she cannot match me when it comes to melted cheese between bread. Part of me is terrified to ever refuse. What if I ruin this magical illusion? What if she realizes it is just dumb luck on my part and suddenly never wants another one? Another part of me wonders if she secretly loves the fact that I have something unique to offer her in the kitchen, even if it is silly. Maybe for once, I am the one providing her comfort food, instead of the other way around. So here I am, still making toasties, still confused, and still slightly amused at the situation. The irony is not lost on me. The one dish I can outshine her in is the one that requires the least skill. Maybe that is the point. Cooking, at its core, is not just about skill or technique. Sometimes it is about love, timing, and the smallest comforts. Maybe that is the real reason why my toasties mean so much to her. So, did I really mess up by out-cooking my world-class chef girlfriend with nothing but a toast tie?
Can HR really force me to invite someone to my wedding? This is still one of the strangest workplace experiences I have ever had. It all started when a coworker I was only casually friendly with decided she should have a place at my wedding. To set the stage, this coworker and I were not close. We had shared small talk in the break room, exchanged the occasional comment about the weather, and maybe laughed about something in the office once or twice. But we had never gone to lunch together, never met up outside of work, and certainly never confided in each other. We were acquaintances in the loosest sense of the word. When she found out I was getting married, her first question was not congratulations or curiosity about how long I had been engaged. No, her immediate question was, "When's the wedding?" And then without hesitation she asked, "Am I invited?" I laughed lightly, thinking she was joking, and said, "Oh no, it's really small. Just close friends and family." I did not think anything of it. To me, that was the end of the conversation. But the way she went quiet and gave me this frosty look should have been my first clue that she was taking it seriously. A few days later, I got a calendar invite for a meeting with Human Resources. I had no idea why, and I walked in with the kind of nervousness you feel when you think something might be wrong, but you do not know what it is. When I sat down, the HR representative looked almost as confused as I did, but explained that a complaint had been filed against me. Apparently, this coworker had reported me for being exclusive and creating a hostile environment because I did not invite her to my wedding. She tried to frame it as if I was somehow discriminating against her by leaving her out of what she considered a group event. I had to sit there and explain with a straight face that my wedding was not a company function, that it was a personal event, paid for by me and my fiancé, and that I was under no obligation to invite anyone from the office at all. The HR representative nodded along, clearly understanding the absurdity of the complaint. It was obvious they were only holding this meeting because they were required to document and close the complaint formally. Once I clarified that this was a private, personal celebration and not related to work in any way, they said, "Okay, thank you, that's all." And the matter was considered resolved. I walked out shaking my head, still stunned that she had taken it that far. And the fallout did not end there. Since then, she has treated me with this weird passive-aggressive attitude around the office. She gives me side eyes when I pass by, makes sarcastic little remarks about how inclusive some people are, and will drop petty digs when she thinks I am not paying attention. The funniest part is that her behavior has only alienated her further from me and others. I have heard other coworkers whispering about how ridiculous the whole situation was, and I am far from the only person she has made uncomfortable with her commentary since. What shocks me most is the sense of entitlement she had. It was as if she believed that just by existing in the same office space, she had earned the right to attend one of the most personal and intimate events of my life. She seemed to believe that HR had the power to force me to include her in my wedding guest list, which is laughable when you think about it. Weddings are expensive, they are personal, and they are about the couple and their families, not about extending invitations to people you barely know from work. To this day, I cannot wrap my head around how she thought this was going to play out. Did she truly think HR would tell me, "Yes, you must invite her or else?" Or that I would suddenly cave in and add her to the list after she tried to report me? What ended up happening was that she only embarrassed herself. She damaged her own reputation in the office, and she certainly guaranteed that she will never be welcome at any personal event of mine in the future. Some people really do believe they are the main character in everyone else's lives. For me, the lesson was simple. Sometimes you just have to let people reveal who they are, and then keep moving forward with your own plans. So, do you think I was wrong for not inviting her, or was she completely out of line? What would you do if after years of pain, you finally heard the words, "You're cancer-free"? I have carried this secret inside me for only a few hours, but it feels like it is bursting out of my chest. I need to tell someone, anyone, before I sit down with my husband tonight and say the words that will change everything. I have to say them to him face to face, because he has been beside me through every terrifying scan, every sleepless night, every tear-soaked pillow. But right now, as I wait for him to come home from work, the silence is unbearable. I cannot keep this inside. My story started in 2020 when I was 36 years old. I had gone for some routine checks and was told that I had a brain tumor. At the time, the doctors believed it was benign. They reassured me not to panic. It was the middle of a global pandemic, so things were left at that. I tried to believe their calm words, tried to carry on as normally as I could, but a dark cloud lingered in my mind. In early 2023, my world collapsed. A scan revealed that the tumor had bled, and I was rushed to neurosurgery. They removed it, and afterward I was told that it had in fact been cancer. The doctor seemed optimistic, calling me in remission, and saying the chances of recurrence were very small. For a moment I let myself believe I was free. But just 4 months later I felt the symptoms return. My doctor decided to order another scan, and what they found left me shattered. Not only was the tumor back, but it had grown to the size of a walnut in only a few months. They promised me it would be simple this time. Just a few rounds of oral chemotherapy and I would be fine. That turned out to be a cruel illusion. Over the next 2 years I endured 8 different types of chemotherapy, a staggering total of 49 cycles. I underwent 2 more brain surgeries. I had multiple courses of radiotherapy. I was dragged through discussions of palliative care more than once. My immune system collapsed and I suffered infection after infection. The treatments damaged my kidneys, my heart, and my lungs. My body became unrecognizable to me. I was a shadow of who I had been before. Yet through every painful stage my husband stood by me. He was there in hospital rooms, he held my hand when I vomited, he rubbed my back when I cried. He was my anchor when I felt like I was drifting into despair. And today, for the first time, he was not there when the doctor spoke the words. It wasn't his fault, could not leave work on such short notice, but as I sat across from my oncologist, I ached for his presence. This morning I had received a phone call asking me to come in urgently. My stomach knotted with dread. I have heard that tone in a nurse's voice before, and it has never been good news. I braced myself for the worst, for another grueling plan, for another mountain to climb when my body felt too weak to continue. Instead, I was told something I could hardly comprehend. The battle which had consumed the last 5 years of my life was over. My oncologist smiled as he told me the words that felt like music. I am officially cancer-free. I nearly collapsed with relief. Tears streamed down my face. After everything, after surgeries and chemo, after endless hospital gowns and tubes, after nights where I begged the universe for mercy, I am free. I drove home in a daze, barely able to process it. I wanted to scream it out the window to strangers on the street. I wanted to hug every nurse, every doctor, every janitor in the hospital. I wanted to call my mother, my siblings, my friends. But before all of them, I need to tell my husband. As I sit here waiting for him to walk through the door, I picture his face when he hears me say it. I imagine the tears in his eyes, the way he will pull me into his arms, the relief that will wash over both of us like a tidal wave. We can finally breathe again. We can finally dream again. I am overwhelmed with gratitude. My body is scarred, damaged, exhausted, but I am alive. The nightmare is over. I am no longer a patient fighting for her life. I am a survivor stepping into her future. Tonight, when my husband comes home, we will celebrate. Maybe not with champagne or a fancy dinner. Maybe we will just sit on the couch, hold hands, and finally allow ourselves to believe that the worst has passed. Whatever it looks like, it will be beautiful because it will be ours. I am cancer-free. Those words feel like the purest miracle I could ever receive. After everything I went through, what would you do first if you were finally told you were cancer-free? Was I wrong to tell my brother-in-law chores could fix his marriage? Last weekend my husband and his brother went golfing. When they got home, my husband told me his brother, Colin, would not stop complaining about the lack of intimacy in his marriage. He said Colin kept going on about how frustrated he was, and my husband found it annoying. Later I was with my sister, who is married to Colin, and I asked her directly what was going on. She rolled her eyes and explained that Colin never helps around the house. By the time she gets home from work, makes dinner, gets the kids ready for bed, and prepares for the next day, she is exhausted. All she wants to do is read a little before going to sleep. She said Colin spends his evenings working out, watching sports, or finding excuses not to help. That night we all had dinner together. After the meal, my husband stood up and began clearing the table. He told me and my sister to sit down because he and Colin would take care of it, since they had spent the whole day golfing. This was after my husband had already picked up the food, brought wine, and even grabbed ice cream from my favorite shop. Colin, of course, immediately tried to duck out. He muttered that he had something to do and started walking toward the door. That was when I spoke up. I said, Colin, maybe if you helped clear the table, then Marie might be in the mood later. Colin exploded. He started ranting that he was busy, that he did not have time to help with chores, and that he did not want his relationship to be transactional where he had to pay for intimacy by doing favors. Things got heated because I did not back down. He pointed at my husband and said, "What, does he get rewarded with sex because he did the dishes?" I explained that it was not about the dishes. It was about partnership. My husband helped out because he knew I was tired, and he had already taken care of dinner and dessert. That kind of support makes me feel valued, which naturally makes me want to be close to him. Colin stormed out of the house and did not come back until after we had left. My sister later told me that he had not spoken to her since that night. I felt guilty because maybe I had overstepped. It was not my marriage after all. But at the same time, part of me hoped it would be a wake-up call for him. After thinking it over, I FaceTimed my sister and apologized. I explained that my intention had been to help, but I recognized that it was unfair to put her in that position during dinner. I also apologized for suggesting that helping with chores would automatically lead to intimacy, because that took away her agency. She told me not to worry and accepted my apology. She also shared that Colin finally admitted he was under a lot of stress at work, and that he came home wanting to shut down. They started talking about ways he could contribute more without feeling overwhelmed. I even apologized to Colin directly. I told him I was sorry for overstepping, and he admitted that he lashed out because he was embarrassed about being called out in front of everyone. While we were talking, my husband offered to host a cousin sleepover for their kids so that Colin and Marie could have a night alone. They resisted at first, but my husband insisted. He even said he would take the kids to breakfast the next morning at a diner, which he loves any excuse to do. That is the kind of man my husband is. He sees partnership as teamwork. He never acts like chores are beneath him or like helping me is optional. He knows that relationships thrive when both partners pull their weight. I love him for that, and I wish Colin could see that too. Maybe now he does. I still wonder if I was wrong for speaking up, even though it came from a good place. I know I embarrassed him and maybe it was not my business. But when you watch someone you love struggle, sometimes you cannot hold your tongue. So, was I wrong for telling my brother-in-law that helping around the house might lead to more intimacy?
What would you do if you found out your dad isn't really your dad the moment you asked him for college help? I was 18 when my world shattered. For as long as I could remember, my family had felt solid. My dad was the man who took me to ball games, taught me to fish, drilled me in math when I was struggling, and proudly told the story behind my name. He was an engineer, a practical guy, and I always thought he was proud of me. My siblings and I grew up in the same house with the same traditions, and I believed I was as much a part of the family as anyone else. But when it was my turn to ask for help with college, everything came crashing down. Both my older brother and sister had their entire college experience paid for by my dad. He covered tuition, rent, food, cars, pocket money, everything. My brother has already graduated with a job, his own place, and a fiancée. My sister is 2 years away from finishing and has a good job while still having my dad cover most of her bills. I had just been accepted to the same college, and I assumed my path would follow the same track. But when I asked my dad how we would handle my expenses, he sat me down and told me something I never expected. He said my mom had an affair 18 years ago, and I was the result. He told me I was not his biological son and that because of that, he would not pay for my college. He said my mom had 18 years to tell me the truth and prepare me, but she never did. He claimed it wasn't his place to say anything, and now that I was grown, he was done supporting me. My grandparents had apparently known, but they also stayed silent. My siblings were as shocked as I was because there had never been a single hint. I sat there stunned, remembering every fishing trip, every tutoring session, every laugh we'd shared, wondering if all of it had been fake. My mom cried and apologized but had nothing concrete to offer. I was terrified. I had never worked. I had no savings beyond a few $100s, and suddenly I was facing the possibility that I couldn't go to college at all. For days I hid in my room, embarrassed to even leave, not knowing if I'd still be welcome in my own home. I felt unwanted, abandoned, and completely unprepared for the future. A man out there was my biological father, but he had never wanted anything to do with me. Meanwhile, the man I had always called Dad suddenly treated me like a stranger. The support I received online pushed me to at least talk to my mom and siblings. My sister promised me she had my back. I started making calls to financial aid and researching student jobs. It was overwhelming, but I had no choice. Then, tragedy struck me. Grandfather had a stroke and later passed away. My dad was consumed with helping my grandmother, and our family was plunged into grief. In that environment, conversations shifted, and I eventually managed to talk with both parents again. Turned out the timing of everything had been awful. My parents had been in the middle of a heated fight when my mom brought up the past, and my dad snapped. He later admitted he was overwhelmed with grief and anger, and taking it out on me was wrong. He apologized, saying he did love me, even if I wasn't his blood. He promised to help with college after all. To be safe, my grandmother assured me my grandfather had left money to be split among us siblings, enough to cover my tuition if needed. I still hurt. I still feel the sting of being told I wasn't really his son, especially after 18 years of believing I was. But I also came to understand that he had raised me, loved me, and taught me all those things not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That counts for something. I realized my world wasn't as fragile as I had thought. My siblings, grandparents, and extended family all supported me. My mom admitted she had babied me too much and failed to prepare me for adulthood, but she promised to do better. I no longer feel an urge to seek out my biological father. To me, my family is here, messy as it may be. I do plan to work, to become more independent, not to distance myself but to make sure I never feel that helpless again. It will take time to heal, but I know now that I'm loved and that my future isn't ruined. So, what would you do if you found out you weren't really your father's child just as you were about to start your future? How would you feel if your ex-wife and her new husband legally took your full name? I was married once, and it ended in the most painful way possible. My ex-wife betrayed me by cheating with one of my closest friends. That moment shattered me, but eventually I rebuilt my life. I thought I had put the worst behind me. I accepted the divorce, moved forward, and even tolerated the fact that she decided to keep my last name afterward. It felt odd, but I chose not to make a fuss about it. Fast forward to the present, and I just received news that has me questioning my sanity. My ex-wife married the very man she cheated on me with. Fine, that part did not surprise me. What did catch me off guard was their choice of a new last name. Her new husband's last name is the same as my first name. When they decided to hyphenate, their new married surname ended up being identical to my full legal name. To put it simply, imagine your name is David Carter. The man your wife cheated with is John David. They marry, hyphenate their names, and present themselves proudly as Mr. and Mrs. David Carter. That is literally your exact name. When I first saw the proof, I stared at it in disbelief, wondering how the two of them could think this was acceptable. A mutual acquaintance sent me a screenshot from Facebook showing their announcement. They were smiling ear to ear, proudly captioning their photo. "Here's to the new official Mr. and Mrs. David Carter." Meanwhile, I was staring at my phone in shock, realizing that my ex-wife and her affair partner had just legally rebranded themselves as me. The worst part is my name is not common. It is unique enough that people who come across their new identity might assume it is me. Imagine having to explain repeatedly that the couple flaunting themselves online with your name are not you, but your ex-wife and her new husband. Feels twisted, like some cruel joke designed to erase my individuality. I keep running through the reasons they might have done this. Was it ignorance? Or did they genuinely not realize how bizarre it would look? Or was it deliberate? A final jab to leave me feeling replaced and mocked? Knowing how their relationship began, I cannot help but think there is some malice behind it. Friends I have spoken to agree it is surreal. They laugh nervously, shake their heads, and say things like, "That's insane," or "What's wrong with them?" But at the end of the day, I am the one left to deal with the fallout. If someone runs a background check or even just casually Googles my name, they might stumble across them. It is like my identity has been hijacked without my consent. The anger and disbelief swirl together every time I think about it. It is not just about a name, it is about dignity, boundaries, and respect. My ex-wife already broke my trust when she betrayed our marriage. Now she and her new husband are parading around with my name as though I never existed except as inspiration for their bizarre rebranding. I find myself asking whether I should pursue legal advice. Is there any way to challenge this? Or would that make me look petty and obsessed with them? A part of me wonders if ignoring them is the better choice, but another part of me feels like letting it go means letting them walk all over me again. I never imagined that one day I would be scrolling through my phone and see my ex-wife and her affair partner smiling under the banner of my own name. It feels like an insult layered on top of betrayal, a twisted parody of my life. I cannot shake the feeling that this is just as messed up as it seems. So, am I overreacting for thinking my ex-wife and her new husband legally taking my full name is completely insane? What happens when an entitled mother-in-law tries to boss around an engineer? I work as an engineer, and while I do not usually take on consulting work outside of my job, I sometimes make exceptions for people I know personally. In this case, a good friend asked me if I could help his in-laws with some major renovations and additions they were planning for their home. I agreed, not because I wanted the project, but only because he asked me. The house was old and complicated, and I knew from the start that it would likely be a mess. Before I even began, my friend warned me that his mother-in-law could be unpleasant. That turned out to be an understatement. She treated me as if I were her personal servant, snapping her fingers in emails and talking down to me as though she was in charge of everything. Even though I was charging barely a fraction of what a normal firm would ask, probably 1/10, acted as though she owned me. Still, I tolerated her rudeness at first, thinking I could handle it for the sake of my friend. Things escalated when I needed to set up a time to visit their house and verify some details. I offered several options, including weekends and evenings, because I also have a full-time job during the day. None of those times worked for her. Instead, she demanded I come during my office work hours because that was more convenient for her schedule. I politely explained that I could not do that this side work would have to be done on my terms, weekends or evenings only. That was when she completely lost it. She became hostile, telling me that because she was paying me, I had to adjust to her availability, not the other way around. She sent nasty messages, acting as though I was some employee she could boss around. I had reached my limit, so I copied my friend into the email chain and let them know that I was done. I told them to find someone else to do the work. My friend apologized, but I said it was no problem, it simply was not worth my time anymore. The mother-in-law was stunned that I would walk away. She emailed me back in disbelief, insisting that this was not how business was done, as if I had somehow broken some unwritten rule. I ignored her. 3 weeks later, I received another email, this time from her husband. He begged me to reconsider and even promised that his wife would not be involved in any way. Turned out that after I walked away, they began contacting professional firms. Not only were the quotes significantly higher, but the timelines were much longer. They had just bought this house and wanted to move in quickly, but the industry was overwhelmed with projects at the time. Companies were not eager to take on a complicated, messy renovation for difficult clients. My friend told me that while the couple could handle the higher costs, the real issue was the waiting period. Because design and planning would now take months, they risked losing the tradespeople they had already lined up. Their dream of moving in quickly was slipping away, and it was entirely due to the entitled behavior of the mother-in-law. When the husband reached out asking me to save them, I declined. I simply did not trust that the mother-in-law would stay out of it. I had no interest in stepping back into that nightmare, even for the sake of my friend. Later, my friend admitted he found it satisfying to watch his mother-in-law finally face consequences for her actions. Her entitlement had always gone unchecked, but this time it cost her something: real-time, money, and convenience. She had sabotaged her own project by trying to control and disrespect me, and there was nothing anyone could do to undo that. Looking back, I realized that sometimes walking away is the best choice. People like her expect others to bend to their will, and when someone finally refuses, they are shocked. But it felt good to hold my ground and not reward her behavior. At the end of the day, I owed her nothing, and I am glad I remembered that. So, was I wrong to walk away from the project, or was it exactly what she deserved?
What do you do when your husband betrays you with a close friend? I never thought I would be the kind of woman sitting here telling strangers that my husband cheated on me, but here I am. I am 30 years old and my husband, who is 31, has been the center of my life for years. We had only been married a little over a year when everything collapsed. We had the kind of relationship I thought people envied. Valentine's Day was romantic, our anniversary dinners were full of laughter, and we used to feel like soulmates. At least that was what I thought. For a long time I brushed off little red flags. Since around April, he had been refusing intimacy with me. He would avoid my touch, sit on the far end of the couch, and suddenly seem distant. I told myself it was stress, quarantine, maybe even work pressure. I convinced myself that he loved me too much to hurt me. But deep down, the pit in my stomach knew something was wrong. Then came the night everything shattered. I had rolled over in bed, half asleep, when I noticed his phone screen lit up. He was on Snapchat having a conversation with someone I knew all too well, our mutual friend. She had been to my house, she had texted me pretending to care, pretending to be supportive. And yet, there it was in front of my face. Her telling him she wished she could be there to hold him. His reply. He mocked me, saying I had tried to seduce him the night before and making fun of me for it. I confronted him right there. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it would explode out of my chest. I asked him directly if he was having an affair. He admitted it. He said quarantine was stressful, that things had gotten confusing, but that he no longer thought of me as a wife. He told me he only thought of me as a friend in his heart. My world caved in at those words. When I told her husband, he confronted her too. That was when I learned it had started long before I even suspected anything. They had kissed back in February. The timing was cruel. Just the week before that kiss, my husband and I had celebrated Valentine's Day together. He had bought us a bottle of wine, we had laughed, we had felt perfect. But apparently I was already losing him. Suddenly, everything in my home became unbearable. Every corner of the house held memories of him. I felt like I was drowning, and there was no lifeboat in sight. I was laid off from my job around the same time, which gave me way too much time to spiral. I analyzed every moment, every conversation, every smile, wondering which parts had been lies. I started therapy because I could not cope on my own. I felt pathetic clinging to the hope he might come back even though he made it clear he had chosen her. That was the lowest point in my life. But now I want to talk about how I climbed out of it. Because if anyone else is in the same position, you need to hear this. It does get better. He never apologized. I heard through others that he cried to people about ruining his life, but to me he was cold, robotic, like all our history had been erased. And you know what? That helped me let go. He and the other woman are still together, and they deserve each other. I don't care anymore. I decided to take my life back. I moved to a small, walkable city and rented my dream apartment. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. Every corner feels like mine now. Not haunted by ghosts of our marriage. I go out to restaurants, I try new foods, I enjoy life without guilt. I used to be the breadwinner and he always made me feel bad for wanting to enjoy nice meals or experiences. Now no one holds me back. Therapy has been transformative. My therapist has reminded me that I am not a failure. The divorce is not my failure, it is his. He broke his vows, not me. I am learning to love myself again. I have even dipped my toes into dating. Most of it has been mediocre. But recently I met someone who makes me feel desired and appreciated. It is still early and I am cautious, but it feels good to know I do not have to settle. The best part? I wake up excited now. I no longer carry that crushing weight on my chest. Holidays that I thought would destroy me turned out to be beautiful. I spent time with my family, laughing, relaxing, and realizing I do not have to compromise anymore. Looking back, I cannot believe I wasted so much energy begging him, even in my own head, to come home. The truth is, I have built my own home now. I have built my own happiness. And that is so much more powerful than anything he could have given me. So to anyone else going through betrayal, your partner's infidelity does not define your worth. You are not broken. You will heal and you will find joy again. I did. So was I wrong for holding on too long? Or was I just human trying to save my marriage? What happens when a dorm drama turns into a secret revenge plot? I live in a college dorm on an all-female floor. Usually, I put on a bra if I am leaving the building, but inside the hall I feel comfortable just wearing my pajamas or a tank top. It is my home after all. I never thought walking 10 yards down the hall to get some water would stir up so much drama. One evening, I slipped on a white-fitted tank top and padded out to the water fountain to refill my bottle. The tank top was opaque, but because I wasn't wearing a bra, the outline of my chest was faintly visible. A group of people were hanging out nearby, chatting and laughing, but I thought nothing of it. I filled my bottle and went back to my room. Half an hour later, there was a knock at my door. It was one of the girls from the hall. She apologized for the awkward request and asked me if, next time I left my room, I could put on a bra. She explained that her boyfriend was visiting, and he had been staring. I am naturally non-confrontational, so I immediately apologized and said I would be more mindful. That night, anytime I left my room, I pulled on a bra or a sweater. I figured the issue was done. The next day, my roommate overheard this same girl in the bathroom telling a completely different version of the story to her friends. According to her, I had been prancing around practically naked, purposely lingering at the water fountain to show off my chest, even posing provocatively. My roommate said the girl was reenacting me in front of the water fountain, puffing out her chest for dramatic effect. When my roommate told me, I was embarrassed and angry. That evening, I passed by her and her group of friends while heading to brush my teeth. I was already in my pajamas, no bra underneath. She looked down at my chest pointedly, and all of them giggled as if I had confirmed her little performance. I brushed it off, but it stung. The real sting came the next day when the entire dorm received an email from the resident assistant. It was a formal message saying anonymous complaints had been submitted about inappropriate dressing in the hallways, and reminding us to stay covered up. That email was clearly about me, and the fact that she had gone so far as to complain officially, after spreading lies about me, made my blood boil. That was when I decided to get a little petty revenge. I remembered that she had mentioned during orientation that her boyfriend didn't attend our college. I also knew that because of pandemic restrictions, no off-campus boyfriends or friends were allowed inside the dorm. Guests had to be family or registered students. On top of that, masks were mandatory in the hallways, though enforcement was inconsistent. I realized I had the perfect angle. I filled out the same anonymous complaint form she had used against me. I wrote that residents were bringing non-student boyfriends into the dorm, and that they weren't following the mask policy. I hit submit and waited. The very next morning, another email arrived from the RA. This time it announced that, due to multiple anonymous complaints, staff would begin checking IDs of any unfamiliar guests in the hallways to make sure they were registered students. Non-student visitors would no longer be allowed to slip in unnoticed. I had to laugh. Her boyfriend, who had been the reason she came knocking on my door in the first place, was now essentially banned from being in the dorm with her. If she had been so concerned about him staring at me in my tank top, she no longer had to worry. He would not be around to stare at anyone. The funniest part was that she probably never realized it was me who filed the complaint. From her perspective, it just looked like dorm policy suddenly became stricter. She had gone out of her way to make me feel like some sort of shameless exhibitionist, telling exaggerated stories and turning people against me. But her actions gave me the perfect excuse to hit back without ever confronting her directly. What started as a simple trip to the water fountain ended in a lesson. If you create drama out of nothing, it might come back to bite you in the exact place you least want. So, was my petty revenge fair payback, or did I go too far?